Portal Glitchless is one of the most popular speedrunning categories, with over 1,000 runs submitted to the speedrun leaderboards. Because of the sheer volume of competitors, the top spots on the leaderboard are heavily contested, with mere seconds setting them apart. Most of these top runners set their sights on being the best of the best and try to achieve the Portal Glitchless World Record. In January of 2018, Portal Glitchless was finally beaten in under 16 minutes. Minute barriers are always massive in speedrunning, but for Portal Glitchless, this minute mark truly seemed like the final achievement of its kind. Obviously, new skips and such are always discovered that can obliterate expectations, but this is a glitchless category we're talking about. Sure, we can find some new small skips here and there, but to save almost 60 seconds, it would likely take some massive glitch discovery, and those don't really fly in the glitchless speedrun. But without any of these crazy glitches, how exactly do you speedrun Portal? While normal any percent Portal speedruns tend to be some of the more broken speedruns out there, the glitchless run happens to be incredibly clever. The idea of thinking with portals is taken to the extreme, with some incredibly creative unintended solutions. For example, chambers 17 and 18 use wall-mounted cameras to build a tower to climb on, or to block a door in order to save a ton of time. And in chamber 8, we use a small block on the wall to jump to the end of the level. Some of the cooler chambers in the run utilize a mechanic called portal peeking. Basically, we take advantage of the fact that portal projectiles have travel time, so we can pass through a portal, shoot a new portal, and then travel through the portal behind us before it disappears. Portal peeking is used to completely dismantle chambers 16 and 19, and when done in quick succession, these peaks can finish these chambers in the blink of an eye. While speedrunners have done Portal glitchless runs since the game's release, we'll start our story at that sub 16 time, which is kind of the start of modern glitchless speedruns. Believe it or not, I was actually the first runner to beat Portal glitchless in under 16 minutes, achieving a time of 15:59. The run was all around pretty good, with some small mistakes throughout the run, but also some fantastic gold splits to even everything out. With this run being such a big feat, it would stay on top for nearly 6 months, until I once again improved it in June of that year. I was able to get a 15:55. The run had a lot of execution improvements, but overall had more mistakes, which made me more motivated than ever to get a better time. And it only took 2 more days for me to do so, and get a 15:47. This run was fantastic, as it basically used the same strats as the 15:59, but managed to save 12 seconds in just execution. It still had a couple of mistakes, but it was certainly the cleanest run the glitchless category had ever seen. At the time, the glitchless category was still fairly undeveloped, with many runners choosing to run Portal inbounds or out of bounds instead, so no other runner was even close to the sub 16 minute mark, making this 15:47 a very dominant time. With no new innovations, the time would stand all the way into the new year, where a new runner would set their prospects on the glitchless world record. Shazal is an incredibly talented Portal speedrunner, holding top times in almost every Portal category, including the world record in the inbound speedrun. At the start of 2019, Shazal set his eyes on the top of the glitchless leaderboard, a goal that would come much sooner than expected. Shazal was an incredibly consistent runner. All of his strats were nearly identical to mine, but he managed to play so incredibly close to his sum of best on all of his runs. As his times crept closer and closer, it seemed it was only a matter of time until Shazal claimed the throne. On March 15, 2019, Shazal would finally break through, and achieve a time of 15:43, a world record by 4 seconds. The run was incredible, containing almost no mistakes. In fact, the run was so good, it would stay at the top of the leaderboard for the rest of 2019. But little did we know, Shazal was only getting started. In the span of about 5 months in 2020, Chazelle managed to lower the Portal Glitchless record all the way down to a 1527. When Chazelle first got the world record, his sum of best was a 1531, meaning if he played every chamber the fastest he ever had, he would finish at 1531. However, 1 year later, Chazelle managed to get a full run 4 seconds faster than that figure. How is this possible? Well, for one, better execution. The run just generally cuts corners a lot better. A lot of time was saved in the last 4 levels of the game, also known as the escape sequence. These levels are the hardest and most fast-paced levels in the speedrun, and due to them being right at the end of the game, they're incredibly punishing. Chazelle put a ton of time into polishing these levels. Secondly, optimizations. A ton of small optimizations had been discovered, like a precise portal shot in Chamber 19 to skip a fling, or a new rocket turret setup in the GLaDOS fight. But third, and possibly the most compelling factor, was competition. For the first time in what seemed like forever, Portal Glitchless was no longer a one-horse race, as another runner, named Dinos, started to grind out the category. Well, Dinos had actually been running the category for quite a while, achieving respectable low 16-minute times earlier in 2020. However, Dinos' approach to the glitchless category was very different from his competition. While runners like Chazelle and myself focused more on consistency, Dinos was the complete opposite. Dinos would learn the hardest possible strats, and even find new strats that were incredibly difficult. Some of these would only save fractions of seconds, but for Dinos, that minuscule time save was worth it. In fact, Dinos would micro-optimize almost everything in the run, including the movement. You see, while glitchless runs look like they use bunny hopping similar to other Source games, most of it is just for looks. Strafing left and right is hardly faster than just jumping forward in a straight line. Because it seemed so simple, many players overlooked the movement in Portal Glitchless. But Dinos would implement some small pre-hops to gain more speed in hopping sequences, and utilize crouching in some areas to enter rooms ever so slightly earlier, as well as incorporating multiple smaller strafes to go ever so slightly faster. These improvements would save milliseconds, but of course would accumulate over the course of a run. When Dinos really started grinding out glitchless, he first perfected the individual level speedruns, getting world records in many of the chambers. His efforts put his sum of best at 15 minutes flat, and it wouldn't take long for him to perform close to that. On June 20th, 2020, Dinos would grab the world record by 1 second, with a time of 15:26. This run really marked the start of a new era for Portal Glitchless, as most of the previous world records were pretty clean, but this run was messy. There were many obvious mistakes and time losses, but Dinos' strats and gameplay seemed to be on another level from anyone else. After studying Dinos' run, Chazelle was able to take the record back about a week later, and would ultimately improve it to a 15:23. But still, the run had some pretty key mistakes, and for the first time in a while, Portal Glitchless had competition, and it seemed like it could go much, much lower. And it seemed like a new runner would be up to the challenge. During the summer of 2020, Zoochable was one of the fastest improving speedrunners in Portal Glitchless. Starting with a sub-16 run in May, Zoochable's time would only get lower. Zoochable was another runner who focused a ton on consistency, and with the flaws in Chazelle's run, it seemed that consistency was all Zoochable needed. While he was just aiming for a second place time, on August 5th, 2020, the stars would align, and Zoochable would close out a 15:19, a 9-second personal best and a 4-second world record. A lot of Zoochable's grind was offline, so his record very much shocked the community. It seemed that Portal Glitchless was more competitive than ever. But Zoochable's run was near perfect for his standards. In fact, he never even tried to improve it, and would move on to compete in different Portal categories. And only 10 days later, Chazelle would snag the record back, with a 15:16, with the comment, "Dark Chazelle activated, 11-dimensional basketball game concluded." Whatever that means. But this run was pretty good. It felt similar to Chazelle's older world records, in that there were almost no mistakes, and the final time was incredibly close to his sum of best. 2 months later, Dinos would go on to tie this time, achieving a 15:16 of his own. However, in typical Dinos fashion, The run had a bit more mistakes and a bit better execution. And around this time is when a huge epiphany came around. Sub 15 in Portal Glitchless was possible. At least, it seemed possible. Runners like Shazal still believed that a sub 15 run was far-fetched, but Dinos had a sum of best below 15 minutes, so with a perfect run, it could technically happen. Earlier in 2020, Dinos claimed that sub 15 would happen within the year, and now, in November, it seemed like there was a very real chance. There were so many new strats found, like slightly faster flings in Chamber 7 and Chamber 10, dolphin strats in Chamber 11, where the player could pick up the portal gun while swimming on acid to save time, and a ton of small GLaDOS fight optimizations. With all this and much more, 17 seconds didn't seem too far-fetched. But November and December would pass with no new world records. Shazal, Dinos, and even Zuchable wouldn't improve their times at all within this period. Instead, a new runner came to fame. Sidious's first glitchless run was in July of 2020, with a time of 18:23. He noted that he could manage a 16-minute time pretty easily given some more practice. And a 16-minute time was only the start. Over the course of 2020, Sidious would improve his personal best all the way down to a 15:32, a 5th place time that was within striking distance of the world record. Sidious took an approach to glitchless similar to that of Dinos. He meticulously grinded out individual levels, achieving almost all of the IL world records. After learning the hardest, fastest strats, Sidious would attempt full glitchless runs, with a low sum of best and an absurdly low completion rate. And it took a lot of attempts. But on January 14th, 2021, Sidious's efforts would finally pay off, as he would get a nearly 20-second PB to achieve a new world record of 15:12. At the time, Sidious had only completed 12 glitchless runs. That's right, 12 runs out of his 18,000 attempts. That means only 0.065% of his attempts actually reached the end of the game. It was still clear that Sidious had not reached his full potential. There were a fair amount of mistakes in the run, but Sidious made up for it with his incredible execution. Through all that individual level practice, Sidious's gameplay just seemed naturally faster than the competition. So, with only 13 seconds to go, and a ton of runners in reach of the world record, the race for sub 15 was on. However, one runner in particular became very motivated from the competition. Dinos, who promised sub 15 last year, wanted to fulfill a late delivery on that promise. Throughout the following months, Dinos and Sidious were the only runners actively attempting sub 15 runs. However, due to their inconsistent playstyles, there were minimal results and a lot of choked runs. But on March 4th, there was a breakthrough.
So deadly. Deadly neurotoxin.
15:03, a massive 9-second world record. While this run didn't actually break the 15-minute barrier, it put the record only 4 seconds away from it. A sub 15 run seemed inevitable at this point, but while inevitable, it certainly wouldn't be easy. Dinos had played a masterful run, but what made it really impressive is that he had the fastest escape sequence ever seen in a glitchless speedrun. Sure, you could definitely find a way to save 4 seconds, but matching the rest of the run was a tall task. At this point, only Dinos and Sidious seemed capable of scoring those extra 4 seconds, and while the task seemed simple, it turned out to be incredibly challenging. For almost 3 months, Dinos' 15:03 would stay on top. To really push these runners over the edge, some new strats were implemented, like the Spider-Man strat in Chamber 16, where the player would stand on top of the sign at the start of the chamber. This makes it so the player's camera, or portal gun, is through the portal while their body stays on the sign, so they can spam portals but not actually change their position. This was much quicker and easier than the Pika portals. Additionally, these runners started going for the falling door shot in Chamber 18, where instead of shooting portals to get in front of the door, the player would shoot a portal on the small portion of the ceiling while falling down. This strat had been known for a while as a segmented or individual level strategy, but it was deemed too precise for full runs. But when it came down to it, These two wanted to squeeze every single second out of this category, no matter how difficult. Despite these time saves being added to the run, these runners really struggled to cross that 15-minute finish line. June went by with some small progress, but also a ton of chokes. Around this time, another runner named A-Rock had joined the race to sub 15, getting low 15-minute times. By the time July rolled around, A-Rock achieved a 15:04 time, only 1 second away from the world record. Now, with a third runner in the mix, sub 15 really seemed like an inevitability. It seemed that any day, one of these three runners would achieve a sub 15 time. Though unfortunately, days went by with many more chokes and disappointing runs. But finally, on the 25th of July, something amazing happened. Sidious had become the first speedrunner to beat Portal Glitchless in under 15 minutes, crushing the barrier with a time of 14:55. Sidious's run was incredible. It featured the second best time ever to enter Chamber 11, nearly 4 whole seconds ahead of Dinos' world record, as well as a really solid mid-game. The run lost a bit of time in the escapes, particularly in the GLaDOS boss fight, but overall, it was a spectacular run. As a matter of fact, that's where the record stands today. Since then, A-Rock has also achieved a sub 15-minute run, with a time of 14:59, becoming the second runner to accomplish this incredible task. The combined effort, determination, and ingenuity of many speedrunners managed to make Portal Glitchless a whole minute faster, from the 15-minute times all the way down to the 14-minute times. And who knows, Sidious's run isn't perfect, and with his sum of best standing at 14:26, it's clear that this time can go much, much lower. But as always, only time will tell. Thanks for watching.